Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. On this episode, we are discussing the latest release from Yes. And for that, I needed to recruit a Yes expert. And so with me, joining me is Jeff Whitcher from Jeff Whitcher's Vinyl Destination. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking a little time out to join me on one of my videos, and been enjoying some of yours lately. Watched your Van Halen and Foreigner vinyl ones. Those were very, very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're here to discuss the latest release from Yes. And I think you've been a Yes fan longer than me. I got into them actually about 3 years ago. How long have you been into the band?
I've been into them since probably the late 70s. My dad had Close to the Edge on vinyl. And so that was my very first introduction to Yes. And they were on the radio all the time when I was growing up in, elementary school and then through high school. I was always hearing, especially the songs, like Roundabout or Long Distance Runaround. I've seen All Good People, where it just got heavy radio play on rock and roll radio stations. So Yes goes a long way back for me.
So I first heard of them, like a lot of people in my generation, with Owner of a Lonely Heart, when 90125 came out of the video age. And it's funny, I got into them about 3 years ago, and I've done an episode stating that. Because I've been a Rush fan for a long, long time, I always knew they were a huge influence. Yes, were a huge influence on Rush. So when, Rush weren't putting out any new albums, it was cool to get into a band that I still consider them to be the proto Rush. Like, without more than any one band, I think that if it weren't for Yes, there wouldn't be a Rush. So not that they particularly sound like them, but just the idea of the challenging arrangements and the stellar musicianship. So yeah, it's been fun because it's fun to get into a band and really enjoy that has this huge catalog that you can really sink your teeth into. And since then, I think I've got pretty much everything, except they've got a lot of live albums, as you know. And that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and if you can even keep track of their lineup changes over the year, it's like Fleetwood Mac, where untangle all the different members and who's come, who's gone, who returned, then who left. So there's a lot of that, particularly with this CD, trying to, it's 3/5 of the lineup that was on Drama, which is one of my favorite Yes albums. And I feel like that, actually this one right here, I feel like this is
I love it.
Yes's most underrated albums. It's the
love it.
I think they ever did. Machine Messiah is, for my money, one of Yes's best songs. And just right out of the gate, it just establishes this is going to be a heavy record. And I think that's one of the reasons why John Anderson and Rick Wakeman actually left before that album, was because they didn't want to go in that direction. They didn't want to do the heavy stuff. They wanted to kind of keep it more, Chris Squire and, Steve Howe wanted to take Yes in a heavier direction, and Rick Wakeman and John Anderson wanted to explore more progressive kind of textures and, keep it a little lighter. And so, from what I understand, that was what kind of led to that split of the classic lineup right before they recorded the album.
Yeah, I love Drama. It's one of my favorites. It might even be my favorite. I don't know. And I've said this before. If you were like me and you're primarily a Rush fan, I think that's the best introduction to Yes, because it is the heaviest. I mean, Machine Messiah doesn't really happen. Tempest Fugit, it's so good. But yeah, and I'll be discussing that a little bit because I just went back in my CDs, my Yes CDs, before we get to the current one that just came out. In the last 6 years, this will show you the live releases that have come out from Yes. So the last studio album they did was in 2014, Heaven and Earth. So since then, there's this one, which is called Like It Is, at the Bristol Hippodrome. And on this album, they do, this is when they were doing whole albums. So they do Going for the One and the Yes album, two of my favorites as well. So that's this CD. That was 2014. 2015, Rhino put this out called Progeny Highlights from 72. Now, this is archival stuff. This is essentially cut from the same cloth, the same recordings that made up the Yes Songs live album. There's some really good stuff on here. Then in 2017, this came out, Topographic Drama, Live Across America. And as we just talked about, the first thing on here is they do the Drama album in its entirety, which is always good. You know, can't go wrong there. And they do Tales from Topographic Oceans, and there's a few other songs. Then to throw a little monkey wrench into things, the other Yes put out a live album. Yes, featuring Trevor Rabin and Rick Wakeman, live at the Apollo. This came out in 2018. So there, at that point, there were two Yeses on the road. Last year, they put this one out, Yes 50 Live, which it's got songs from all over their catalog. That was a double live. Then this one came out. It's from 2003, but the version I have came out last year. It's live at Glastonbury Festival. Now, the funny thing is about Yes, and I'm gonna keep bringing Rush up because that's sort of my point of reference. Unlike Rush, where you can listen to, you know, let's say 5 different live recordings of Closer to the Heart over the years, and they really didn't sound that different. The Yes live songs I find sound very, very different depending on the lineup. Mm-hmm. Which brings us to, in the year 2020, this, which is the Royal Affair Tour, Yes, live from Las Vegas. And you and I both just recently got this. It hasn't been out for too long. There you go. And unlike their previous double live, or their previous live releases in the last few years, this is only a single disc, which makes it only a double album. I'm not sure why they did that. There's 10 tracks on here, spanning their career. And it's the lineup, the current lineup as we know it, which is Steve Howe, Alan White on drums, Jeff Downes on keyboards, John Davison on lead vocals, Billy Sherwood on bass and vocals, and Jay Shellen on drums, 2 drummers. And we'll get to that in a second too.
Well, and the thing that is interesting is that the one track that was part of that concert that is not part of this CD was Gates of Delirium from Relayer. So I feel like that could have taken up a second disc just in and of itself if they had wanted to make this a double CD package.
I would have liked to have heard that too, because I love Relayer too. That's another. Relayer might be the second heaviest Yes album. I don't know how you feel about that, but
yeah, no, I would have to agree. You know, especially I think, you know, it was a pretty bold move because after Tales from Topographic Oceans, people thought it's too bloated. There's too much information. It was a double set. There were only 4 tracks on it. Each track took up one side of the album. And then they go and release Relayer, which only has 3 songs on it, you know, one of which takes up an entire side. So they certainly weren't, you know, bowing to critical pressure to keep it, you know, tighter and shorter. I mean, Relayer, as much as it's sprawling, I feel like Relayer is almost like, could have been the 5th side of, you know, Tales from Topographic Oceans, because it continues that there's different suites. They move in and out of melodies. Yeah, I think Soon, which is kind of at the tail end of that, actually got released, or at least it was condensed for Rock and Roll Radio. Which is a great track from that song.
Yeah, I find Relayer, I mean, we can talk about the individual studio albums all day. I find Relayer more concise and an easier listen than Tales from Topographic Oceans. There's some out there stuff on there, but I like it. Sound Chaser has some interesting parts to it. And yeah, they did release Soon as a standalone single. I mean, you know, they had to put something out for a single, you know, what were they going to do? So Jeff, let's get into well, first of all, let's talk about important things like the packaging. Here's the gatefold, I guess you could call it, with the current version of Yes. Since the death of Chris Squire in 2015, no original members are still in the band. And basically what this has in it is just band photos and a little bit of credits. I don't know about you. What do you think of the track selection on this, the 10 tracks that they did select?
Well, I think it was actually kind of bold. And I'm not aware that Yes ever, I mean, not since at least the late 60s, maybe early 70s, that they've ever recorded No Opportunity Necessary, No Experience Needed, which is off Time and a Word. Yep. So I think started off with a track like that, which I think is relatively obscure, and to my knowledge, not on any Yes live album that they've ever released. And I looked through all of their live stuff. I don't see that anywhere. So I think that was really a bold choice to start off the album with. And it's not a typical John Anderson song. It's almost sung at a lower register than some of his more, the stuff that he's famous for. So right out of the gate, I thought I love that track. So I'm glad that they included it on here, because it would have been easy to just play it safe, open with some of the stuff that they're, more traditionally known for. So I like that. I like the fact that Tempest Fugit is on here from Drama. That's one of Yes's most fantastic songs. I like that Going for the One is on here. Most of their albums are represented from their classic period on here. So, I like the fact that Onward is on here, which there was a version on the Keys to Ascension, that project, but that was more acoustic in nature. There wasn't much in the way of drumming. It was just more of an acoustic kind of arrangement, where on here, it's a little truer to the version that was on Tormato. So I like that. But yeah, I'm overall happy. The one track, and we'll probably get into it, that I feel sticks out like a sore thumb is Imagine.
Yeah.
For the life of me, I have no idea why they chose that. I mean, there's the connection with Alan White, but
yeah,
John Lodge sings it. It's not even sung by John Davidson. John Lodge from the Moody Blues actually sings it.
I think they go back and forth, actually. I think they go back and forth on the vocals. But
yeah,
you're right. Yeah. So like
that for me was the one where I was scratching my head, like, why is this on here? It's just was odd to me.
Well, I think they do John Lennon's Imagine on here, and some people might find that strange. But if you're up on your Yes history, drummer Alan White, before he replaced Bill Bruford in Yes, he actually played on the original. He played on the Imagine album, so that gave him some. There you go. That gave him some serious cred, although not necessarily. It didn't really say, "Oh yeah, this guy's a good prog rock drummer."
Mm-hmm.
I think I
was going to say he was one of the original members of John Lennon's Plastic Ono band. John Lennon did a concert. It wasn't exclusively a John Lennon concert. It was a Toronto rock and roll revival.
Oh, yeah.
1960.
That's Alice Cooper famously, the chicken incident happened.
Oh,
yeah,
was that where that happened?
He played there, and the Doors played there. I'm trying to think who else, but there was someone else that played there. I think Ronnie Hawkins played there.
Sure.
And the Alice Cooper portion of that show there's been so many CDs put out of that show, and I love Alice Cooper, but that to me, that point in his career was not the best.
But it's part of the Alice Cooper legend for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Alan White was part of John Lennon's band that he just kind of really quickly assembled together. And then they did John Lennon's first musical solo album, which was called Plastic Ono Band, that Alan White and Ringo Starr shared drumming on. And then he drummed on Imagine. And you can actually, there's a DVD out, it's called Give Me Some Truth, which documents the recording sessions for Imagine. And there's a lot of Alan White. You can see Alan White in that video, and he's doing the drumming, and they're talking about the actual song Imagine and how that song is, the arrangement of that song, and he's there kind of providing some input. So he very much was, but listening to that album, it's so light years away from anything that Yes was doing. So it's kind of odd that he was plucked from, the Plastic Ono band to be a member of Yes.
I wonder, and I mean, obviously the Beatles influenced everyone, but I mean, Yes are certainly quick to mention that. I mean, they even cover Every Little Thing on their first album. I wonder if it was because there was a tour. I mean, they had to tour to support Close to the Edge. They needed a drummer, and they needed a drummer quick, and they needed someone who could get up to speed. But I mean, to be able to say that, of all the people that have covered Imagine, it's like, well, he's got as much of a right as anybody to cover this song because he actually played on the original version. So, yeah, it's funny when you talk about the first two Yes albums, they do, no opportunity necessary, no experience needed. Opening track on the second album, Time and a Word, and it's There's actually a fair amount. I was surprised to find this out when I delved into their catalog. There's a surprising amount of covers on those first two albums. Like they cover the Beatles, they cover Stephen Stills, and this one is a Richie Havens song. Now it doesn't sound much different, although you're right, it is lower, and I think that's why. It's because it wasn't written with John Anderson in mind, and I actually think that John Davison sounds pretty good singing on this one. Again, Tempest Fugit. Look, you could play that song in any Yes concert, and I'd be very, very happy. Anything from Drama. I just love that album. I love Going for the One. That's a great song. I actually think this version sounds better. Trying to think which one of these, of the many live albums that they put out, it might have been, oh, it was the one, the live at the Bristol Hippodrome, where they do the entire album. I think John Davison sounds a little bit better on this one. His singing sounds a little bit better. Seen All Good People, of course, that's a staple. Siberian Katru, however you pronounce that, that always sounds good. Onward is cool. I like the version of Onward on here. I really like Tormato. It's not a really popular Yes album with a lot of fans, but I really, really like it. It's the production's not great, but I love the songs. And then they do one that's they've covered it years ago, but they brought it back. America, their cover of the Paul Simon song, which was originally done, I think, as a B-side. Mm-hmm. And it's on the remastered version of Fragile. So I'm guessing that's about the time it was recorded. And then it was actually on a compilation too called Yesterdays. It was the first. Yes, yeah. And actually, it was the historical part of that. It was on a really obscure Atlantic sampler called The New Age of Atlantic, which also contained Hey, Hey, What Can I Do by Led Zeppelin. For many years, that was the only place you could get that album. But I looked this up and I was surprised. America, as a standalone single, actually went to 46 on Billboard. It was almost a top 40 single. Wow. As a sort of standalone song, cover of Simon and Garfunkel. And this one says it includes Southern Solo by Steve Howe. Now, unless that's the name he gives to that midsection where he kind of gets into not really the chicken picking, but I didn't hear anything different from the version of it they recorded previously and the version that's on Keys to Ascension 1. But maybe he's given a name to that midsection now. I don't know. And then they wrap it up with Roundabout and Starship Trooper. So it's 10 songs, but it's Yes. So a lot of the songs are really long. Mm-hmm. So Jeff, in your opinion, now, I guess here's a question for you. Have you seen Yes live? And if so, when?
I have not, unfortunately. They're kind of on my bucket list, although unfortunately Chris Squire obviously passed away in 2015. So I don't know if John Anderson is ever going to be back. So I would love to see them in one form or another, but I have to confess, I have not, unfortunately. I've just had to enjoy their live stuff that's been on their CDs or albums.
So what do you think about the way that the band sounds in recent years on all of these live albums? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, John Davison is as close as you're going to get to John Anderson. And, obviously all the material that they're covering are stuff that John Anderson sang on. They're not including any of the Heaven and Earth material, at least that I'm aware of in some of their recent concerts, and definitely not on this disc. I think they sound fine. I notice, to be fair to Steve Howe, his guitar playing is so sophisticated and it's so complex and it's got to be so tricky to play. And I notice, on this disc, I can't imagine, at his advanced age, just trying to keep up with some of the licks and some of the playing that he has to do, especially on songs like, Siberian Car True, where it's just some of those sections, it's just so, I got to imagine the dexterity that it requires to be able to move up and down that fretboard and play some of the licks that he does. It's got to be so challenging. So, there are moments where I feel like, probably they've covered this better before, but, I'm not going to complain. I feel they stuck pretty safe to the original arrangements on here, but I can imagine being there, seeing it live just had to have been an incredible experience. I'm so happy Starship Trooper is on here. They close most of their concerts with Starship Trooper, so I guess it's not a surprise that that's on here, but I was happy to see that did close out this set list, because if I had to pick one Yes track, that would probably be my favorite. I just love the heck out of that track. But I would say overall, I'm pretty happy with the way that they play. I feel like they're a tight group. I feel like John Davison's vocals are well throughout. You know, and on some of them, you could have fooled me that it wasn't John Anderson. That's how close his voice comes to sounding like John Anderson.
Yeah, he's really good. I actually thought that that Benoit David did a pretty good John Anderson too, and I actually really liked Fly From Here. I really liked that album. Heaven and Earth, I don't know if I could listen to it more because I can never remember any of the songs from it after, you know, right off the top of my head, I can remember some of the song titles, but I can't really remember how they go. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that, you know, I mean, look, if they put a new studio album out, I'd buy it. This is my kind of thoughts on, and I know what you mean about Steve Howe, the dexterity in those. I noticed they have slowed a lot of the tempos down, especially something like Going for the One, which granted in its original form from 77 is pretty frantic. And it's like really fast slide guitar playing on it. Tempest Fugit is a lot slower than it is on Drama. It's very intricate playing as well. Main thing I notice is that the tempos are, they kind of breathe. There's kind of a rise and fall to it. And the fact that they have Jay Shellen on drums, and he's been associated with them for the last few years, I have to wonder, other than the fact that he's a longtime member of the band, why Alan White bothers. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I feel like he does. Jay Shelling does a lot of the heavy lifting on this album.
Yes,
I doubt very seriously, you know, some of those passages, especially on, you know, Tempest Fugit. I can't see Alan White. No, again, no knock against Alan White, but, you know, at his advanced age, you know, I got to believe, you know, it's hard to keep up. And so I think, like you say, they are making allowances to the fact that this band, you know, is older than they used to be. They can't rock out like they did back in their heyday. And so, yeah, I think, you know, having Jay Shelling there was just to be able to maintain, you know, the pace of some of the recordings, just some of the fluidity that's needed. You know, so I don't mind that at all. I like the fact that Alan White is here, but, you know, listening to this, I got to believe that, you know, Jay is doing a lot of the heavy work here.
Yeah, I think so too. And Jay Shellen, if those of you are, if you think, why does that name sound familiar? If you remember the band Hurricane from the late 80s, which is the band that Kelly Hansen sang for, who's now the singer in Foreigner. Like a lot of the 80s bands, they found homes in some of the 70s rock bands. Yeah, I agree. When Alan White is by himself, I'm noticing that a lot of the drum fills are simplified and just not done. Now, having said that, that's not a slam. This is hard stuff to play. And, you know, would I like to go see them? Well, I'd like to go see just about anybody right about now. But yeah, I would, as a newly minted fan, I would like to go see them. But I will say this, if I'd had the choice, and this is probably going to rankle some longtime fans, I would rather go see this lineup. And I'll tell you why. Because of my age, I like 90125, Big Generator. Those were the first songs I was introduced to by Yes. Obviously, Owner of a Lonely Heart was everywhere. You couldn't get away from it. But Changes, Hold On, Love Will Find a Way, Rhythm of Love. I really like that. I like that commercial, Yes, when Trevor Rabin brought into it. And they do the old stuff on there too. But I mean, John Anderson, I've seen clips of him in recent years. The guy's 76 years old and he still sings amazingly. And I know that it's been 7 years now, but all anyone has to do is watch the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They do Owner of a Lonely Heart, and then they do Roundabout with Geddy Lee on bass, which was just so awesome. But John sounded great on there. And who knows? Like you said, these guys, John Anderson's come and gone. Rick Wakeman, how many times has he come and gone? I think before it's all said and done, they're probably going to have, you know, if they can, they're probably going to do a tour where they have, you know, some of these, especially those guys. Those seem to be the biggest bones of contention. Because I mean, on the 50 Live, I'm pretty sure that yeah, Patrick Moraz does Soon with them. And he only played on the one album. The first two Yes albums, yeah, there's not a lot from there that they dip into. I know that they do Time and a Word, at least part of that, and on the Yes Live 50 they did Sweet Dreams. But yeah, I like the track listing on this for just a simple 10-track one CD set. I think they did a pretty good job. Although I wish they would dip into that 80s period. Because the average person going to see Yes in 2018, 2019, when concerts were happening, they don't know the history of the band. When they hear the name Yes, if they're like me and a little younger, they think Owner of a Lonely Heart. And if they go there, well, that sucked. They didn't even play Owner of a Lonely Heart. I mean, and I know they did it with Steve Howe because they did it with Benoit David. They did it with when Billy Sherwood played like backup guitar before, well, in the latter era. Late 90s, early 2000s. So it's not like they couldn't learn it. You know what I mean? Like even if they threw in that and maybe changes, just to acknowledge that period, because it was a really successful period for them. It's a little bit like, to go off in another direction, Bad Company. I mean, Mick Ralphs and Simon Kirke, they totally disavow the Brian Howe era, which I thought was great. And that's where I first heard of Bad Company. But back to Yes. So yeah, I mean, do you suppose that they thought about putting this out as a double and maybe decided to just put it out as a single to see if it'd sell more because it was cheaper?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe they just didn't want to, or I don't know if it was a record company decision or a creative decision that they just kept it to one disc, because even if they had like a deluxe version of it where you could either get it as a single disc or a 2-disc, I would have enjoyed just having Gates of Delirium, just hearing what they sounded like doing that, because that is an epic suite right there. And to hear that from start to finish, I think would have been amazing. But, and it's to speak to, them not doing anything from the 80s, part of this tour that they went on incorporated Asia, and actually a couple members from this lineup are still in the current version of Asia. Steve Howe is, Billy Sherwood is, Jeff Downes, was an original member of Asia, and that started in the early 80s. So, I'm just puzzled why they didn't throw Love Will Find a Way or Owner of a Lonely Heart or Leave It or something from that era just to have it represented, because I think they've got a nice cross-section of 70s stuff on here, but nothing beyond that. The most recent track on here being, Tempest Fugit from Drama in 1980, but I would have liked something, because I think most people, radio-wise, the song that they recognize most is Owner of a Lonely Heart. So I'm not sure why they didn't do that. I would have rather heard that than Imagine, to be honest with you. And like I say, I'm a John Lennon fan, but to get back to that, I just feel like it's so out of left field. And I understand that Alan White drummed on it, but then, Jeff Downes used to be in the Buggles, so they could have done Radio
Killed the Radio Star.
Video Killed the Radio Star. We're going to get into that, like Ringo Starr's All-Star Band, where everybody gets a turn doing a song that they played on from, years past. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen, I guess, at least one track from, that early 80s period. They were originally going to be called Cinema, so maybe the Cinema period maybe is what we call it. But yeah.
I've heard it referred to as Yes West as well, the Trevor
Sure.
Rabin. Mm-hmm. And it's probably got a lot to do with, I'm sure there's egos involved, and Steve Howe doesn't want to play songs that Trevor Rabin wrote, even though he did. But that's one of those cases where, I mean, even Styx eventually bit the bullet and started playing Mr. Roboto. It's for the fans. It's like, if if you hear a band name and you think of a song, to me, that'd be like Kansas not doing Wayward Son.
Sure.
It was their biggest hit. It was a #1 song. And I think, I've never looked this up, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if the two biggest selling Yes albums weren't Fragile and 90125 as far as studio albums go. Maybe Close to the Edge, but yeah, a lot of people bought 90125, and that's the first thing and sometimes the only thing they bought by Yes. So if you're going to buy a ticket to go see a band in concert, you're going to know enough to know they're going to do a bunch of these long songs. Maybe Roundabout, maybe Seen All Good People. You're definitely going to know as soon as the opening of Owner of a Lonely Heart goes, I mean, the place would go nuts. But who knows? A lot of these bands.
I think Owner of a Lonely Heart was almost a gateway for people and the kids in the 80s who were watching MTV. If you like that, maybe to go back and rediscover some of Yes's stuff from the 70s, because there was that whole period where punk rock and new wave was kind of coming on the scene. And so all that progressive stuff was looked down on as, well, that's dinosaur rock and that's bloated, self-indulgent stuff. And so, people kind of, had put away those 70, like bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, bands that people thought as, oh, that's so, out of style. But with, Owner of a Lonely Heart, there's some great, tracks like Roundabout, Long Distance Runaround that, fans would, recognize and maybe reconnect to. But, at any rate, I would have liked to have seen it on here.
I wish they would. And it's funny, you mentioned Gates of Delirium. Now, I remember before all the concerts started getting canceled and postponed, I'm pretty sure that they were doing a relayer set. Now, that would have been cool.
Most definitely. And I it feels like they've almost, on one tour of another, done each of their albums in its entirety. And Relayer, I've seen many people rank that as their favorite Yes album. I think kind of, in hindsight, people have gone back and rediscovered that because it's easy to overlook it because it's have Rick Wakeman on it. And it's sort of that in between. It's only has 3 tracks on it. So, you've got to spend some time with it to really appreciate it. And some people just don't have the patience for that. But I would love to, if they haven't yet. I really think they should go and revisit that and do that in its entirety. And I wonder if, the fact that they did one side, the Gates of Delirium on this tour, if maybe, that's something we could come to expect in the future.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they would do 2 albums, because they do like Drama, Topographic Oceans. They're going for the Yes album. And I think earlier they did Close to the Edge and Fragile. That's one of those live albums that I can't find. Another thing about the recent live albums, you mentioned the record company for a second, is that unlike most of the recent ones that Rhino Records put out, which is distributed by Warner, this one's on BMG. So maybe they signed a new deal. Who knows? I mean, for any of these guys right now, I don't know if you've got any creativity left in you. Seems to me this would be the perfect time to be writing, sending tracks back and forth. Maybe they'll unleash a new studio album, and hopefully it's really good. Yeah.
Well, in 2020, they are, at least there's rumblings that there's going to be a new studio album. I don't think they're going to meet the deadline of 2020 because we're into November already. But I had heard that they've been, at least John Davison in interviews has been saying they've been doing some studio work with an idea of releasing a new studio album for 2020. So I'd be interested to see, hopefully it's better than Heaven and Earth. Because like you say, I think for the most part, it's pretty forgettable. But
I think that they should do another one. They should definitely do another one. I think they should get Trevor Horn to produce it again. And maybe if they can't reunite all the members on a tour, maybe reunite them on the album. Have John Anderson sing on a track. Have Wakeman play on a track. Have Patrick Moraz play on a track. Have Trevor Rabin contribute a song and play on a track, because he's a great singer in his own right. And just have a real sense of it would be cool for me, as a guy that's only been into the band for 3 years, to have at least one new studio album to look forward to before they call it a day. Because these guys are getting up there in age, like a lot of my favorite bands, unfortunately. Yeah. So Jeff, that's the new Yes, the Royal Affair live from Las Vegas. I'm not sure when exactly it was. I think it was recorded sometime last year. Obviously, it wasn't recorded this year. I got to
July 26, 2019.
There you go. This is a cool shot with like the variants of the Fragile on there. And I mean, as always, excellent cover art from Roger Dean. You can never go wrong with his stuff.
Yeah, that's the one thing. If you don't like the album itself, at least you can appreciate the cover art. It's worth having just for Roger Dean's cover art in itself. And I read too, and I don't know if it was for this album or if it was Heaven and Earth. I think it was this album. They actually live streamed Roger Dean doing the artwork. for this.
Oh, cool.
If it's available on YouTube, but I've always wondered, like, you know, how long does it take him, you know, his technique. I would just love to see Roger Dean do one of these paintings because it's so iconic. It's such a part of Yes that I would love to have seen that.
You know what the significance is to the lion on top of the logo?
Is that a Las Vegas thing where
Oh yeah,
casinos?
CMGM Grand.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's the line of it's the MGM logo.
Mhm.
Exactly. But it spent 2 seconds in my mind, I would have thought of that. So
Right.
Jeff, that's the latest Yes release. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this. It's good to pick the brain of a guy that's been into the band much longer than me, and yeah, it's been great. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim.